Welcome to Just Stories. We hope you enjoy the story. Desert Storm, The Persian Gulf War of 1990-91, by Just Stories. Chapter 1, The Build-Up. The events that led to the Persian Gulf War of 1990-91 were a culmination of years of tensions between Iraq and its neighbors, particularly Kuwait. In this chapter, we will delve into the build-up to the war, including the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, the international response, and the formation of a coalition to counter Saddam Hussein's aggression. In 1990, Iraq was struggling to recover from its war with Iran, which had ended in 1988. Meanwhile, Kuwait, a small but wealthy country to Iraq's south, was enjoying an economic boom. However, tensions had been simmering between the two countries for years, primarily over disputes regarding oil production and borders. Iraq had accused Kuwait of overproducing oil and driving down prices, which hurt Iraq's already struggling economy. On August 2, 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. Iraqi forces quickly overran the country, and within days, Kuwait had been annexed by Iraq. The international community was quick to condemn Iraq's actions, with the United Nations Security Council passing a resolution condemning the invasion and demanding Iraq's withdrawal from Kuwait. The United States, led by President George H.W. Bush, was particularly vocal in its opposition to Iraq's invasion. President Bush saw Iraq's aggression as a direct threat to the stability of the Middle East and the international order. In response, he ordered U.S. forces to be deployed to Saudi Arabia, which borders both Iraq and Kuwait. This deployment, known as Operation Desert Shield, was intended to protect Saudi Arabia from potential Iraqi attack and to prepare for an eventual offensive to liberate Kuwait. Other countries quickly joined the U.S. in condemning Iraq's actions and supporting the formation of a coalition to counter Iraq's aggression. The coalition eventually included 39 countries, including many of Kuwait's neighbors in the Middle East, as well as European and Asian countries. This broad international support was crucial in isolating Iraq and providing the coalition with the resources it needed to counter Saddam Hussein's well-equipped military. In the lead-up to the war, the U.S. and its allies worked to build up their military presence in the region. U.S. troops were sent to Saudi Arabia, along with large quantities of equipment and supplies. The coalition also began a massive air and naval buildup, with aircraft carriers, fighter jets, and other military assets arriving in the region from around the world. The build-up to the Persian Gulf War was a tense and uncertain time, as the world watched to see how Saddam Hussein would respond to the international condemnation of his actions. The deployment of U.S. troops to Saudi Arabia was particularly controversial, as it represented a significant escalation in the U.S. presence in the Middle East. Nevertheless, the coalition held firm in its opposition to Iraq's aggression, laying the groundwork for what would become one of the most significant military campaigns of the 20th century. Chapter 2, Operation Desert Shield. After Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, the international community quickly mobilized to counter Saddam Hussein's aggression. The United States, in particular, took a leading role in responding to the crisis, deploying troops and equipment to the region to protect Saudi Arabia from potential Iraqi attack and to prepare for an eventual offensive to liberate Kuwait. This deployment, known as Operation Desert Shield, marked the beginning of the Persian Gulf War. In this chapter, we will explore the details of Operation Desert Shield, including the deployment of troops, the logistical challenges of operating in the harsh desert environment, and the preparations made for a potential ground offensive. Operation Desert Shield officially began on August 7, 1990, when U.S. troops began arriving in Saudi Arabia. Over the next several weeks, a massive military buildup took place, as troops, equipment, and supplies were transported to the region from around the world. By January 1991, there were over 500,000 U.S. troops in the Middle East, along with tens of thousands of troops from other coalition countries. Deploying such a large force to the desert posed significant logistical challenges. Temperatures in the region regularly exceeded 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and the harsh desert environment was particularly hard on equipment. The coalition had to develop new tactics and procedures for operating in the desert, including adapting vehicles and equipment for use in sandy terrain. Despite these challenges, the coalition was able to rapidly build up its military capabilities in the region. In addition to ground troops, the coalition deployed a vast array of aircraft, including bombers, fighter jets, and transport planes. Aircraft carriers and other naval assets were also sent to the region to provide additional support. One of the primary objectives of Operation Desert Shield was to deter Iraq from attacking Saudi Arabia. The coalition established a defensive perimeter along the Saudi-Iraqi border, with U.S. troops positioned to counter any potential Iraqi incursions. This defensive posture was crucial in preventing Iraq from making a move against Saudi Arabia, which would have likely triggered a wider conflict. In addition to its defensive posture, the coalition also used Operation Desert Shield to prepare for an eventual offensive to liberate Kuwait. This included extensive training exercises as well as the stockpiling of weapons and supplies. The coalition also worked to gather intelligence on Iraqi military capabilities and deployments, which would be crucial in planning any offensive action. As the months wore on, tensions in the region continued to escalate. Iraq repeatedly threatened to use chemical weapons against the coalition, and there were several instances of cross-border skirmishes and missile attacks. However, the coalition's show of force and determination ultimately succeeded in deterring Iraq from making a move against Saudi Arabia. Operation Desert Shield represented a significant military undertaking, requiring the deployment of hundreds of thousands of troops and vast amounts of equipment to a harsh and unfamiliar environment. Despite these challenges, the coalition was able to rapidly build up its capabilities and establish a defensive posture that prevented Iraq from making further aggressive moves. In the next chapter, we will explore the next phase of the war, the air and ground campaign that ultimately forced Iraq out of Kuwait. Chapter 3, Operation Desert Storm. After months of build-up and preparation, the coalition launched its offensive against Iraq on January 17, 1991. This offensive, known as Operation Desert Storm, was a massive air and ground campaign designed to force Iraq out of Kuwait and cripple its military capabilities. In this chapter, we will explore the details of Operation Desert Storm, including the key battles, the role of air power in the campaign, and the eventual liberation of Kuwait. The first phase of Operation Desert Storm was a massive air campaign, which began on January 17th. The coalition launched a total of over 100,000 sorties during the campaign, targeting Iraqi military installations, airfields, and other strategic targets. The U.S. led the air campaign, with aircraft such as the F-15 Eagle, F-16 Fighting Falcon, and B-52 bomber carrying out bombing runs on Iraqi targets. The air campaign was crucial in weakening Iraq's military capabilities and softening up their defenses for the ground offensive. However, it also had a significant impact on civilians in Iraq, with many civilian targets also being hit during the campaign. This led to controversy and criticism from some quarters, with concerns raised about the impact of the bombing on Iraqi civilians. On February 24th, the coalition launched the ground offensive, with troops moving across the border into Kuwait. The ground campaign was led by the U.S., which deployed a massive armored force including Abrams tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles. Other coalition countries also played a significant role in the ground offensive, with British, French, and Saudi Arabian troops taking part in the fighting. The ground offensive saw several key battles, including the Battle of Camouflage, a town on the Saudi-Kuwaiti border that was briefly occupied by Iraqi forces. The battle saw heavy fighting between coalition and Iraqi troops, with coalition air power providing crucial support. The battle eventually ended with the coalition forces repelling the Iraqi attack and retaking the town. The coalition also launched a massive flanking maneuver, which saw U.S. and British troops move deep into Iraqi territory, threatening to cut off Iraqi supply lines and encircle their forces. The maneuver was highly successful, and by February 28, Iraqi forces had largely been driven out of Kuwait. On February 28, President Bush declared a ceasefire, ending the offensive phase of the war. Kuwait had been liberated, and Iraq's military capabilities had been severely degraded. The war had lasted just over a month, with the coalition suffering relatively few casualties. Operation Desert Storm represented a massive military undertaking involving hundreds of thousands of troops and vast amounts of equipment. The air campaign was a crucial part of the offensive, and the use of ground troops also played a significant role in the eventual success of the campaign. The next chapter will explore the impact of the war on the home front, including the role of the media, public opinion, and the experiences of soldiers and their families. Chapter 4: Home Front. The Persian Gulf War had a significant impact on the home front, both in the United States and other countries involved in the conflict. In this chapter, we will explore the role of the media, public opinion, and the experiences of soldiers and their families during the war. The media played a significant role in shaping public perception of the war. The war was one of the first conflicts to be extensively covered by cable news networks, with 24-hour news coverage providing a constant stream of updates on the conflict. The images of bombing runs and missile strikes were broadcast around the world, providing a constant reminder of the conflict and its toll. The media coverage of the war was not without controversy, however. Some critics accused the media of being too focused on the sensational aspects of the conflict, such as the bombing of Baghdad, and not giving enough attention to the human impact of the war. Others argued that the media's coverage of the war was overly sanitized, with little attention paid to the suffering of Iraqi civilians. Public opinion about the war was generally supportive, with many people in the U.S. and other countries seeing the conflict as a necessary response to Iraq's aggression. However, there were also concerns about the human cost of the war, particularly as casualties began to mount. In the U.S., there were also concerns about the economic impact of the war, as the government spent billions of dollars on the conflict. The war had a significant impact on soldiers and their families as well. Many soldiers were called up from their civilian lives to serve in the conflict, leaving behind their families and jobs. The deployment was particularly hard on National Guard and reserve units, which were not used to being deployed for extended periods of time. Families also faced the challenge of coping with the uncertainty and stress of having a loved one deployed to a war zone. The U.S. military made significant efforts to provide support to soldiers and their families during the conflict, including providing counseling services and financial support. The end of the war brought a sense of relief for soldiers and their families, as well as for the broader public. However, the conflict would have a lasting impact on the U.S. military, leading to significant changes in strategy and organization. The war also had a significant impact on the political and economic landscape of the Middle East, setting the stage for future conflicts and tensions. Overall, the home front played a crucial role in the Persian Gulf War, shaping public opinion and providing support for soldiers and their families. The media coverage of the war was both influential and controversial, providing a constant reminder of the conflict and its impact. The next chapter will explore the aftermath of the war, including the ongoing impact on the Middle East and the lessons learned from the conflict. Chapter 5: Aftermath. The Persian Gulf War had a significant impact on the Middle East and the broader international community. In this chapter, we will explore the ongoing impact of the war, including its effect on the Middle East, the role of the United States in the region, and the lessons learned from the conflict. The end of the war saw Iraq's military capabilities severely degraded, but Saddam Hussein remained in power. The United States and its allies implemented a no-fly zone in northern and southern Iraq, which restricted Iraq's ability to project military power. However, the sanctions imposed on Iraq in the aftermath of the war also had a significant impact on the country's civilian population, leading to widespread suffering and humanitarian concerns. The war also had a significant impact on the political and economic landscape of the Middle East. It highlighted the importance of oil to the global economy, as well as the vulnerability of oil-producing countries to political instability and conflict. The war also led to a reconfiguration of power dynamics in the region, with the U.S. emerging as a dominant military and political force. The war also had a lasting impact on the U.S. military. The conflict demonstrated the effectiveness of a coordinated air and ground campaign, and it led to significant changes in military strategy and organization. It also highlighted the importance of joint operations and the need for effective coordination between different branches of the military. The aftermath of the Persian Gulf War also set the stage for future conflicts and tensions in the region. The presence of U.S. forces in Saudi Arabia and the broader Middle East would be a source of ongoing controversy, particularly among Islamist extremists who saw it as a form of Western imperialism. The sanctions imposed on Iraq would also become a point of contention, with some arguing that they unfairly punished the civilian population of Iraq. Overall, the Persian Gulf War had a significant impact on the Middle East and the broader international community. It highlighted the importance of oil to the global economy, as well as the vulnerability of oil-producing countries to political instability and conflict. The war also demonstrated the effectiveness of coordinated air and ground campaigns, leading to significant changes in military strategy and organization. The aftermath of the war would set the stage for future conflicts and tensions, highlighting the ongoing challenges of maintaining stability in the Middle East. Thank you for watching our story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so you don't miss out on our next video.